Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm glad you could make it. And on this icy evening, hopefully there aren't too many branches falling down in your neighborhood. But welcome to tonight's Kitchen Table Talk in Action. My name is Laura Dewey, and I'm the president of the Detroit branch of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Some of you know our organization, but I see some new faces here. So if you're not familiar with our organization, well, you should be. WILPF is a women's peace organization formed in the aftermath of a conference held in 1915. During World War I, over 900 women traveled from the US and other countries to The Hague in the Netherlands to attend a peace conference. From there, they sent delegates to meet with nations' leaders to plead their case to end the war. And from that effort, WILPF was born. One of our founders was the social reformer Jane Addams, who is best known for starting Hull House. We have sections in over 44 countries, and in the United States, we have over 35 branches. Our primary focus over the past 107 years has been peace and disarmament. But nationwide, we also work on issues like racial justice and the environment. Because for us, peace means not just the absence of war, but a just, equitable society that cares for the planet. So get to know us. Check out our website. I'll put it in the chat in a minute, or email us for more information. We're always looking for new members. And like all the peace groups in the area, we need the younger generation to step up. Well, today's topic, unfortunately, it's one we've dealt with before, which is the proliferation of gun violence. It was only a little more than a year ago when we hosted a discussion about gun violence, particularly in schools, and the mental health of young people in the aftermath of the Oxford High School shootings. One of our speakers was State Senator Rosemary Bayer, who talked about gun safety bills that were proposed in the state legislature, but they didn't go anywhere. Tonight, we're going to hear about some of the similar legislation and more, which does have a better chance of getting passed. So our speaker today is Lauren Jasinski, who represents End Gun Violence Michigan. Unfortunately, our other speaker, Vicki Schroeder, can't be here due to some personal issues. So after we hear from Lauren, we're going to go into Q&A, and then we'll spend some time writing our elected officials or making phone calls or texting them. So let's get started. First, we're going to watch a video statement by State Representative Ranjeev Puri. He is not the state senator, as our flyer first said, but Lansing is in his district. So right after the MSU shooting, he issued a statement with the headline, F, your thoughts and prayers. He was very angry, justifiably so, and he got some backlash from it. So let's hear from Representative Puri. Let's see if I can. Oh, sorry.
Hi, everyone. This is State Representative Ranjeev Puri. I'm honored to be joining you today, but I'm saddened to be having this conversation on the heels of yet another senseless mass shooting here in Michigan. And this is just 15 months removed from a previous mass shooting in Oxford, Michigan. Now, we unfortunately have moved our society to a place where we are desensitized from these horrific events. Watching those horrific events unfold just the other night, I was just like every other Michigander, sitting on the edge of my seat, watching in horror as local media outlets produced terrifying images as we all refreshed our social media and news channels to see the latest information about what was happening. I was left with a feeling of anxiety and frustration and helplessness, but I also had deja vu of knowing that we go through this way too often. And so the question has become of what can be done. And so it's going to take partnership with organizations such as the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and fighting for the values of justice, equality for all, and humanity, and making sure that we are driving and asking our state officials for policy changes that sit in those values. And so I urge everyone to make sure that you are contacting your local representatives, your local state representatives, your local state senators, and to demand for change. Now, the people of Michigan spoke, and they demanded a gun sense majority in both the House and the Senate and in the governor's office. And so I'm confident with the right advocacy and the right leadership that we will be delivering for the people of Michigan. And that will be bringing common sense gun reform solutions to the table and passing those laws into place to making sure that we are making a difference in the lives of everyday Michiganders. Now, I'm a father to 3 small boys, and I've had the rough conversations with other parents at the bus stop of thinking, when we board our young boys and girls onto the bus, is that the last time we're going to see them? Now, those are not the type of conversations we need to be having in Michigan. We need to be talking about a bright future for today's kids and tomorrow's future, because after all, the futures of our kids and future kids is the most precious resource we have here in Michigan. And so again, I am honored to be a part of the conversation today. I appreciate all the advocacy your organization is doing, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And he did not swear once in that video. So anyway, so now we're going to go right away to Lauren Jasinski. She is a former teacher at Oxford High School. And Lauren, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and of course, how you got involved in this issue?
Sorry, got ahead of myself. Hi, everybody. Like we said, my name is Lauren Jasinski. I'm really honored to be here with you tonight. Thank you for taking time out of your cold evening. I'm hoping that all of your power holds out, that we can make it, for the next hour together. So as Laura said, I was a teacher at Oxford High School during the shooting in November of 2021. I had taught for 10 years with Oxford Community Schools. That was where I had spent my entire career. I am a Michigan State alumni, and so there's a lot about this last week that has hit very, very close to home for a variety of reasons. I've always considered myself an advocate. I've always spoken out when I think things are unfair. Gun violence prevention has actually always been a cause that was really important to me. I've had every town signs that say disarm hate and end gun violence in my classroom for the really probably since Sandy Hook. My very first year teaching in front of students on my own was 2012. And so that fall, I had to look a group of 7th graders in the eye and tell them that I couldn't confidently tell them that they were safe at school. And that's been my entire career in the classroom. We've had to practice drills. Security has hardened. We've had to have more and more of these, what teachers call day after conversations with our classes, that as we're sent young people back in front of us, we not only have to continue doing what our job is, but we also have to explain all of these horrific things that are happening in the world. As much as I was aware of gun violence being a problem countrywide and statewide, I really wasn't ready for what it was going to look like to impact me directly. I did finish out the year there. I did return back to the classroom in January. It was an important part of my own healing process, but I did resign in the spring and chose not to go back to the classroom. I was actually just talking to Judith before this call started. I'm going to be starting a new job at Wayne State. So I am moving forward in some different ways, hopefully impacting education in some different ways. But just one of the many losses of my own really was my career too. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from personally as we go through some of these things. I'm going to give you some information. I'm going to share my screen in just a second. Basically what I have for you is in 3 kind of chunks of information. I've got some statistics and information that I just want you to mull over. I understand that with a group like this, I'm not here to convince you that gun violence is a horrific problem, right? That I'm not talking to people that don't believe that this is an epidemic in our world, in our lives right now. But I do think that some of the statistics help put a lens and a frame on some of these things so that we can talk about them with our friends and neighbors. Hopefully, maybe it's also some stuff that you can include in your letter or in your phone calls that we make it together in a little bit. I also then want to walk through what some of the legislative actions have been in this last week. As Leslie said at the beginning, we are finally seeing some opportunity. I'm going to remain cautiously optimistic as we explain them and talk through them. But I can answer some questions and some details about what is and maybe what isn't in those bills. And then there's a call to action at the end about some ways that we can remain involved and engaged, and some action steps and some events that I'd like to invite you to. So before we get started, why don't you, just so I kind of have a better frame of reference for, here we go. Good. Can everybody see my screen? It's got an image up at the top with End Gun Violence Michigan logo.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent, good. What I want to make sure that we have a chance to talk about just a little bit before I launch right into a ton of information is that it helps me to know who I'm talking to and who's in front of us. So if you're comfortable, if you could share your answer to one or two of these questions. Has gun violence directly impacted you in your life in some way? You don't have to give us too many specifics. I just like to know when I'm speaking with survivors. And if that's not a question you're comfortable answering, or if your answer is no, tell me a little bit about how you're feeling this week, just with everything that's happening in our country and in our state. I'll give everybody a minute to do that.
Lisa's coming over, I think,
No,
because they don't have power. We're having on Sunday.
she's coming here?
Yeah, looks like it.
No?
No, tomorrow maybe. I don't know. Zoom chat, has gun violence impacted you directly? How are you feeling this week?
Hey, Nick
After?
and Lois, would you mind muting your end of your microphone?
Oh,
We're glad to have you here, but I don't, it might slid on everybody's computer. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Melanie. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned over the last 15 months is that being a gun violence survivor is definitely not just about somebody who is directly in the line of fire or directly in danger. It has a lot to do with anybody that was impacted that day. The way that trauma works is that your brain, your logic brain and your reasonable brain disconnect from each other, right? And so if you think if there's a chance that you're in danger or someone you love is in danger, that trauma is impacting you just as much as if you were in physical danger. Oh, hi, Caitlin. She's one of my former students. Good. Yeah. Sad, feeling overwhelmed, stress. I think that those things are really relatable. Thanks for sharing, everybody. You can continue to add things to the chat. I do have a space for questions at the end, and I think we've got plenty of time for questions at the end. But if things come up, as we go and you want to put them there over in the chat, just kind of as a placeholder, I'll get to them when I can. And hopefully I'll answer them along the way as well. So I'm here from an organization called End Gun Violence Michigan. End Gun Violence Michigan actually is not its own nonprofit. It's a coalition of leaders across the state who are working on gun violence prevention. We came together as a group last January, January of 2022. So a few months following the shooting in Oxford. And over time, we've added more and more people to this coalition. Basically, what we wanted to make sure we were focusing on was that we knew with the election season, there was going to be an opportunity for a reintroduction of some of these bills. And we wanted to make sure that we were speaking with a unified voice, that you didn't have all of these separate organizations trying to ask for meetings, prioritize different things, be in the face of our legislators, all with a slightly different message. And so End Gun Violence Michigan is trying to streamline what some of those asks are. We've been taking legislative meetings for about a year now. We've been meeting with both reps and senators all across the aisle to talk about what some of our priorities are and how we can work together to get some of them progressed. As you can see, it's a really broad coalition. It actually started as an interfaith movement. So the Episcopalian Diocese of Michigan and the United Methodist Church of Michigan were our two like main and first founders. And then since then, we've added on a lot of community organizations, other faith movements, individual organizers, as well as kind of the typical gun violence prevention organizations that you might have heard of already, such as Everytown, Brady, Moms Demand Action, Gifford's Gun Owners for Safety, as well as some other community organizations who work on a variety of issues, kind of like yourselves, but understand that gun violence really stems from a lot of other root social causes that we see in our communities. We also have a growing coalition of physicians who are concerned about the impact of gun violence, which I think is really interesting and I'm really proud of. We have the support of the Detroit Veterans Affairs Hospital, which is really important. We also have the support of both major teachers unions in the state, AFT Michigan and MEA. So like I said, the purpose of this is not to bore you. I know that numbers can kind of make our eyes glaze over, but I really do think that there is an importance in understanding the fact of just how overwhelming some of these statistics are, as well as constantly reminding ourselves that there is a person and a story and a family behind every single one of these statistics. So this was last updated from the Gun Violence Archive in 2022. So these are the most recent numbers that we can come up with. But just last year, we had over 45,000 gun deaths across the United States. This was the highest number ever. Just to make sure we're also understanding about how this data is collected, any type of firearm fatality includes homicide, accidental death, and suicide. Secondly, which is an incredibly concerning statistic, is that gun deaths have increased over the last 4 years by 35%. This means that people are dying at a higher rate. And as of 2020, death by firearm or death by a gun became the leading cause of children and young people across the country and in Michigan. Those statistics are true for both. Fast fact number 3 is that gun violence does have a disproportionate impact in different communities across the state. When in my own personal experience with an example of violence in a school, we were a community that didn't normally see gun violence as a day-to-day issue, but there are plenty of communities across our state that are really impacted by this even greater. I was at a Moms Demand meeting just a couple weeks ago with a really great rep. His name is Donovan McKinney. I think he represents parts of Southwest Detroit. And he was saying, he was like having this realization in real time. And he said, I never considered myself a gun violence survivor because it was such a normal part of my life growing up. He's about my age. He's a millennial. He's in his early 30s. And he said during the time that he was in high school, during his 9th and 10th grade year, he attended 14 funerals of friends and family who were killed due to guns in his neighborhood. But he said at the same time, he said that's horrific. He remembers that, he knows those people, he grieved for them. But even after that, he didn't consider himself a gun violence survivor because it was such an expected part of the way that he grew up. Fast fact number 3 is that should be no surprise, but I do want to always remember this, right, is that states with stronger gun laws have lower rates of gun violence. So for the people that say things like this don't work, laws like this don't work, evil people are going to find way to do evil deeds. When you compare states that do have similar laws to the ones that Michigan has suggested right now, like a state like Hawaii that actually has pretty severe punishments pretty severe consequences for their gun violence laws, compared to someone living in the state of Mississippi, is 8.5 times more likely to die from gun violence. Even states like Florida have some versions of these laws. And so we really need to get on the same page, right? That these laws can have an impact on our lives. Florida passed a version of extreme risk protection orders a few years ago, and they saw accidental deaths due to firearms go down by 54%. And then, like I said earlier, gun violence also became the leading cause of death among children, teens, and young adults, anyone that we put into that group under 25, regardless of race. And just to put that into perspective, when we call something a health epidemic or a health crisis, that meant that people under 30 were 10 times more likely to die by a firearm in the last few years than they were from COVID-19. And we know everything that we did, right, to prevent the spread of that, to deal with it, to deal with the root causes. Okay, thanks, Steve, for that clarification. I couldn't remember where Donovan's district was. Another great resource that we're going to pull from a little bit, and I can give you all these statistics at the end if this is the kind of thing that your brain craves, but the University of Michigan actually has a really, really impressive Institute for Firearm Injury Prevention. They've been able to do a ton of research over the last couple of years, not only about injuries and deaths caused by firearms, but also prevention possibilities, right? That they were able to look at these other states and compare Michigan. If you take a look at this graph, I know the text over on the side is kind of difficult to see, but what you're looking at in this graph are fatalities due to motor vehicle accidents and fatalities due to firearms between 1999 and 2019. So in those 20 years, we saw a rise in initially we saw a rise in motor vehicle crashes. And then we did things about them, right? We instituted different laws. We changed rules on our highways. We added safety precautions to cars, right? We have cars that practically drive themselves now on the roads. And then in the last few years, we've seen those two things flip, where firearms are actually a leading cause of fatality. And again, just to bring this back to some of the disparity involved in this conversation, this isn't just a white person problem. This isn't just a school violence problem, but there are many communities across our state that deal with gun violence on a day-to-day basis when we talk about community crime and neighborhood crime. Another really concerning statistic involving gun violence is suicides as well. If you take a look at this graph here that compares urban areas of Michigan versus rural, you see a huge uptick of death by suicide via a firearm in rural areas. And so we see this issue in every single community across our state, right? This isn't something that's only going to impact wealthy neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods, Black neighborhoods, white neighborhoods. So those were Michigan specific statistics, just to kind of put everything into some context across the whole state. Because this is a state issue, right? Because the federal government hasn't chosen to take many steps in regards to this. We do have gun violence prevention happening on a state-by-state basis. So you can see this little color-coded map here. Michigan falls basically in the middle, which is reflective of the types of laws that we have as well. We don't have the most strict, but we also don't have the most open laws, and our death rates reflect that. Of course, any graph like this also has to do with population too. And then again, you can see here, this is just a slightly different type of a graph, but you can see Michigan is falling pretty much right in the middle there, in between Ohio and Delaware. So economically similar, population is similar. And so you can see that we have some work to do. Here's a bunch more statistics and rates from, like I said, the Firearm Prevention Institute at the University of Michigan. I think we've covered most of these already though. And then this was a really interesting report that was done at the end of 2022. Where the Center of American Progress had gathered a whole bunch of data like this and basically came away with 5 or 6 major takeaways for every state in the union. And these were the 6 takeaways for Michigan. that Michigan has one of the highest rates of homicides for Black people in our country. Those two statistics are that for an average white person, you are likely to, or there's a chance of gun homicide at about 15%. If you're a Black person, that statistic's up to 79%. Gun suicides are also on the rise among youth and veterans. Gun suicide is a permanent result of a temporary state of mind, that if we can get people the help that they need and slow down their access to lethal firearms, we can reduce that rate. Michigan is in the top 3rd nationally for non-fatal gun injuries, which, yes, is a good thing. We're glad that people aren't dying, but this has other types of costs long-term. On average, someone recovering from a gun injury has to pay an additional $5,000 a month for the remainder of their life in related expenses. Gun violence prevention is also a huge issue when we talk about domestic violence. 1 in 5 homicides of women die from intimate partner violence. The leading cause of women in their homes is intimate partner violence. It is not any other type of accident. We also are seeing a rise in stolen guns being used to commit violence. Again, we have, we're talking about breaking laws on top of laws, but if we don't have ways to track those guns, we're not able to find out how and when they're stolen. We're also seeing a really unfortunate rise in armed extremists posing a threat to Michigan. One of the things that I'm going to talk about in a minute is the upcoming hearing that finally was scheduled for these bills. It was supposed to be today. It's probably been delayed till next week. But if you guys want like the world's best example of irony, is that in the Senate office building where this hearing is going to be held, it is illegal for me to take a sign with some kind of statement about gun violence prevention, but it is fully legal for people to bring loaded weapons. And there most likely will be there people voicing their own opinions about the other side of this. Another huge takeaway from all of this is that public opinion supports the passage of a lot of these laws. We have overwhelming support and consensus for a lot of these, what we consider common sense laws. You guys know the way our country is working right now. You guys know how our politics look. You guys know how our party politics look. We don't have this type of consensus on any other issue. And we do agree on this, right? Just before the election last year, 91% of people believed that reducing gun violence was an important election issue or used gun violence prevention to decide their votes. 90% of voters in Michigan are in favor of truly universal background checks, and 82% support the passage of secure storage laws. So where does that leave us? You may or may not have heard that we've just had we finally had some movement on this, right? Although these laws were already in the works, the pressure and the outrage as a result of the shooting at MSU definitely sped up this timeline, and our legislators are appropriately reacting to how upset people are. So the Senate last Wednesday dropped what we call a package of bills. There's 11 bills total. It's 3 separate packages, basically 3 separate topics, and then the accompanying bills are for implementation of those things, right? Appropriate appropriations, enforcement, other things to make those laws work. So the first package is regarding universal background checks. Those are laws or bills 76 through 78. I've got a couple of resources for you here that I can drop in the tracker. If you're really like a legislative nerd like I am, you can follow along with all of these things. Let me get this and then I'll go back to presenting. But we've got a legislative tracker here. If you're interested in following the passage of these bills, finding out how you can know their status, when they're getting hearings and things like that, you can go to this link and you can type in the number of any of these bills as they're presented, and you can follow along with their passage. You can also read them. You can see who the supporters are, who the sponsors are. But basically, at the really like 10,000 foot level, universal background checks would be a law requiring licensed gun dealers to conduct background checks before the sale of any kind of a firearm. Right now, Michigan actually does have a background check law. The problem is that right now, authorized dealers only have to perform a background check during the sale of a pistol. The way that it's written, the law specifically uses the word pistol. So you'll hear gun violence prevention advocates say the phrase truly universal background checks a lot, because all this means is that we're changing one word in this law. That's how simple it is. We're changing the word pistol to the word firearm, and they now close all of those loopholes that were happening over the sale of other types of guns, guns being sold during gun shows, and like person-to-person sales of weapons. The next package of bills is 79 to 82. These are a little bit more complicated. These are considered the secure storage laws. This would require that any individual who owns a firearm to make sure that they are not accessible to minors in one of two ways. They can either store that firearm in a locked box. There are gun safes specifically designed for this purpose. Or they can use what we call a gun lock, which is something that goes into the gun itself. That device would have to be unloaded, locked, and then kept separate from its ammunition. Now, this is one of the bills that makes everybody a little bit scared, because a lot of gun owners feel like this means that law enforcement officers are going to start doing like home checks of some kind, and that they're going to be able to just show up at your door and to demand to see if your gun is locked safely. That is absolutely not what's going to happen. Even if that was the suggestion, we don't have the capacity for that type of law enforcement. This secure storage law, though, would make it so that it is, we're able to prosecute someone if a crime is committed with a firearm that was not locked responsibly and correctly. The people that would be responsible for this are the owners of the firearm, or somebody who enters a premises, a home, a store, something like that, leaves a firearm unattended in a place that they know that children might be. I don't know if you guys just recently heard the story out of Texas where a student turned over a firearm that they had found in their school because it belonged to their superintendent. The superintendent and the principal of that building both were very, very bold and open about the fact that they concealed carry during the day at their school, and they had taken the gun out of wherever they were concealing it to go to the restroom, walked away without it, and a second or third grader turned it over to the front office. These secure storage laws do come with consequences, and this is the enforcement of this is going to be one of the most important things. If somebody is found guilty of not storing their firearm correctly and a minor obtains it, so for example, in mid-January, there was an incident of a middle schooler in Grand Rapids who had brought a gun to school, and it was found on them. In that instance, because no one was harmed, but just because the firearm was found, the parents or whoever owned that gun would have been guilty of a misdemeanor. In the case that that weapon then inflicts injury or death on somebody, that consequence becomes a felony. And then the last type of law that we're going to talk about are extreme risk protection orders. Sometimes you'll hear the phrase ERPO, E-R-P-O. Sometimes these are also called red flag laws. All of those are kind of used interchangeably, but they are officially called extreme risk protection orders. This is a law that could be put into place that would make it so that law enforcement, health officials, family, friends of loved ones could temporarily remove through due process a firearm from a home of someone that they thought could be a danger to themselves or to someone else. Again, like I said, there's a whole list of people that would be able to start this process of enacting an ERPO. It could be a spouse, a former spouse, a co-parent of a child, somebody in a serious dating relationship, somebody who lives with them, so a non-blood related or non-romantically related roommate, a family member that knows another person is in possession of a gun but not in that home, a law enforcement officer that witnesses a crime, or a mental health professional. Extreme risk protection orders are particularly important in these cases of domestic violence. Like I had talked about earlier, that this is really going a far way in being able to protect some of our most vulnerable women and children. The consequences of the ERPO after the report has been done, if it is found by a judge that the best thing for that person would be the removal of a firearm, that person cannot purchase or possess that firearm for a full year. They also can't apply for a concealed weapons permit. If they have a concealed weapons permit, they also surrender that permit. If they violate that within the year, the first offense is a misdemeanor, the second offense is a felony. Okay, I know I've been talking a ton. Can I pause there and answer any questions before we talk about like doing something about this? Because this is the most important part, but I want to make sure that we've covered, that I've covered what I can so far. Is there any of those statistics that didn't make sense? Any of that legislation that you want to double back on? You can either raise your hand or ask a question in the chat or just come off mute and shout it out to me. I don't mind. I was a high school teacher. I taught on Zoom for a year. We can handle all these things. No questions?
I have a question.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't
So,
do that. Thanks, Laura.
yeah, I know some of these bills were introduced before the Supreme Court ruled last summer about that law in New York. Are these bills, these three bills, like, are they bulletproof against the Supreme Court? Sorry for the pun, but are these laws that the Supreme Court's ruling will not affect? That's my question.
Yeah, good question. So part of what was taking so long in the introduction of these was that double, triple, quadruple checking, right? From all of the people involved in the legislative offices to make sure that these were as sound as possible. One of the things that I've already heard in this past week, not to make this partisan, but criticisms by Republicans who are against some of these bills are saying that these packages are a knee-jerk reaction to MSU and that they're not thorough, enough. And that's absolutely not true. These people have been working on these for a very, very long time, nitpicking all of, every single verbiage. The versions of these bills have been introduced for the last 10 years, and they've just never been taken up or even sent to committee for consideration. So it's not like they came out of the blue. Everyone we're talking to, like, I'm not a legal scholar. I haven't looked up every single word of the bills, but everything that we're hearing from the legislators who put these forward are very, very confident that it would not be impacted by the Supreme Court decision. No. Barbara.
Good evening. Thank you, Lauren, for your very insightful and thoughtful presentation to this point. I just wanted to commend you on how you broke down the laws or the legislation, the bills. And my major concern, I don't know whether it's in the form of a question, it's a concern, is that the way you broke it down, these set of bills that's been in the forefront for more than a decade, they serve different purposes as it relates to guns. And what I mean by that is that you broke down the community violence piece as far as legislation. You broke down the domestic violence piece as far as legislation. You broke down the suicide piece as far as legislation. And you broke down the mass shooting piece for legislation. And my concern is that I think there needs to be more policies or more bills just based off of you breaking down the issues of gun violence. Because one bill that's being introduced is not going to address the problem in totality. And I think that's where there's more education and more awareness and more understanding that needs to take place. But I do like how you broke it down. But it's so many sets of legislation and bills, and I think more needs to be added on to the ones that you broke down. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I agree with you 100%. I couldn't have said it better myself. And one of, I think, my fears about this is that we are going to be so enraged by what happened with MSU, think that this was the direct answer to what happened, and then we're going to all celebrate in a couple weeks when they're finally passed. While I will be very glad, right, that we're taking the first steps, these are baby steps in a full process of addressing such a complicated issue, right? This is a cultural problem. This is a health problem. It is a community and education problem as well too, right? And that's why something like this means so much to me, because what I hope I'm doing right now, right, is helping the 20 so of you understand this a little bit more fully, so that we can have an exponential reach, right? So that you can now go talk to some of your friends and family about these things, because it's fine for us to pass these laws. We're going to be able to pat ourselves on the back in a couple weeks. We're going to be able to thank our legislators, but it is just scratching the surface of what truly needs to be done about a lot of this. Another huge aspect of this is that no matter how good these laws are, if our county sheriffs and police officers choose to not enforce them, which some of them are saying that they won't, we're out of luck. There's already some talk that some county sheriffs are going to approach these laws. They're saying that they're going to create what they are calling sanctuary cities. Right? So using that same verbiage that some cities chose to use during our immigration crisis, when people were refusing to impose unfair laws, some county sheriffs across the state are saying that they feel the same way about these laws. They think it infringes on people's rights, and they're going to refuse to enforce them in their communities. So this does not stop with a yes vote in a couple weeks, right? This is going to take a lot of work and a lot of pressure, continued pressure from all of us, to make sure that we're seeing our communities react to this and enforce it. It's also going to take a lot of money, right? These things are going to take a lot of money because they're going to take a lot of training. They're going to take a lot of resources for law enforcement, and the secure storage alone is going to require some appropriations to make sure people can afford the appropriate storage devices for when they purchase them. So I know that wasn't really an answer to your question, but it's not enough is the answer. And we're just going to continue. Like I said, End Gun Violence Michigan is not disbanding in 2 weeks when we get a vote on this. There was a question in the chat from Cassandra. It says, is there a penalty or follow through if a gun is not registered? We do not have any law like that on the books in Michigan. That's not one of the proposed laws. So if a gun is obtained illegally, if it's sold illegally, if it's not registered to the proper person, we don't really have a way of dealing with that right now. So again, like Barbara said, this is just the very beginning of a lot of important laws. So let me tell you what to do about it so we can do something together real quick before we leave. So I've got a couple action steps for you that I want to take with you. This is just something I wanted to read to you. A lot of times I've been doing these speaking engagements with some of my former students from Oxford. And so I just wanted to pass this message on to you from Maddie, one of the students that I work with. Because again, all of these statistics are important, but we have to constantly remember that there are humans behind every single one of these stories, right? Maddie said just recently on Monday at a press conference, she said, my childhood was ripped away from me 14 months ago when I heard gunshots ringing in my ears before 5th period. I don't get to be a normal kid anymore. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I will gladly sacrifice that to protect others from enduring what I've endured. But now it's your turn to protect us, speaking to the legislators. It's your turn to do what you should have done decades ago. Yeah, we may lose voters, you may lose money, you may even lose your spot in office, but trust me when I say there are far worse things to lose. So as we talk to our legislators, I think if we can channel some of Maddie's anger and passion and pleading, I think we're all going to be much better off. So like I said, thing number one that you can do with me if you are free, there was supposed to be the very first hearing on this package of bills today. It got canceled because of the weather. We're pretty confident that it's going to just be rescheduled for next week at the same time. We haven't heard confirmation of that yet though. But if there is any chance that you are free on Thursday and can make it to Lansing to join us and be present for those hearings, the support of people just physically present in the space really helps the legislators. It also really helps the survivors who are being called on to testify. And again, we want to make sure that we who support these bills are outnumbering the people who are there to complain about them. I'm going to circle back to this so that we end on contacting our legislators. And Gun Violence Michigan also has a couple events coming up that we would love for you to join us at. Those of you who are local to the Detroit area, on Monday, March 6th, there's an event called the Faith Forum on Gun Violence. It's being hosted by the Jordan Missionary Baptist Church. That's actually Speaker Tate's home church. And so we're gonna guilt trip him a little bit by bringing the conversation to his own church and having some conversations with survivors. That QR code to the right, I can put the links in the chat in just a minute too, but that QR code to the right, if you scan it, that's the sign up for that event. It's free. Anybody is welcome to come. We just want to get an idea of who's going to be there. That's going to be Monday morning. On Wednesday, March 15th, there is going to be a massive event in Lansing with Gifford's Courage. That's Gabby Gifford's organization. It's a statewide organization. They're doing a call to action. We're hoping by the 15th, that's maybe going to be a celebration, but we'll see. And if there's not a vote by then, it's going to be a very impassioned event. We're really hoping to turn a ton of people out there. There's going to be a few very special guests who I can't name just yet, but if you can pick up what I'm putting down about who might be important at an event at the Capitol hosted by Gabby Giffords, you might be able to follow me along there, but I'm not allowed to say for sure yet. In addition, we're helping support a variety of lobby days throughout the year. The very first of which is going to be on Wednesday, March 22nd. The Episcopalian Church and the United Methodist Church are banding together and doing a lobby day. This is the first lobby day that they've ever done. So this is where members come to Lansing and talk to their reps about the issues that are important to them. Both churches have promised to dedicate their lobby days to the issue of gun violence prevention. So they're not going to be there talking about any other church issue that they have on their plates. They are prioritizing this one and talking about it, why it's important to them as people of faith. And then I know it's a ways off, but if you can put it on your calendars right now to look out for more information from us, Saturday, June 17th, we're going to have a series of statewide marches called Silence the Violence. Pastor Barry at the Church of the Messiah in Detroit has hosted the Silence the Violence March for the last 10 years. And so we're taking it statewide this year and putting it in as many communities as we can. If you want to grab this real quick. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, the very last thing that I want to talk to you guys about is contacting your legislators. So that's going to probably just roll into the end here. So if I want to pass it back to Leslie or Judith, probably, I'm sure you're going to talk through it, but I can put this up on the screen if that's helpful to you.
Yeah, I'll walk us through it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Lauren, this was fabulous. Thank you so much. I learned a lot here. I hope other people did too. So yeah, put that screen up, keep that screen up. And what I also am going to do is I put the link into our state legislature so you can find your representatives, you can find your senators, their phone numbers, their email addresses, and I urge you to pick up a phone right now, go on, open up a new tab on your device right now and find your representative and just write them a quick letter saying you want these bills to be passed. And if you want, I could put the numbers of the bills in the chat also, but please do that right now. And I'm also going to put another link the American Federation of Teachers has started a campaign for getting Congress to ban assault weapons. We've done it before. Unfortunately, the ban ran out, and now it's time to do it again. So what they did is they set up a letter, and they're asking people to send that out too. So I put the link into there, and please sign that too. So hopefully we can get some things done right now. And in the next few minutes, while I urge you just do it right now, get it over with. And I know a lot of us have already called our senators after MSU. I know I did about 3 days later. I had to calm down first, but it's really important that we take action. And also after this meeting, I will send this thing out too, like all these little links and information on these bills, so that you can send them out to your friends and family and have them do what we hope you're doing right now.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the House bills were introduced yesterday, we think, but there's it's a little bit confusing about that actually. We don't have bill numbers for those. So I'm going to put this in the chat too. If you're writing to your senator, you're telling them that you want a yes vote and that you as a constituent support Senate bills 76 through 86. If you're writing to your rep, what you're doing is urging them to schedule a hearing so that we can get a vote on those as soon as possible.
Does anybody have any other questions they would like to ask Lauren?
Well, Lauren, I'm confused. You said Bill 76 to 78 to the Senate and then to the House to schedule a hearing. Is that accurate?
Yep. Yep. So basically what would normally happen with a bill, right? Little civics lesson for everybody, is that the bills would be introduced in one house. They would be sent to committee, voted on, and then sent to the opposite house, right? It could start in either the Senate or the House. What the hope is right now is that this will speed up some time, is that both the Senate and the House are introducing nearly identical bill packages, so that when they do switch chambers, they won't have to have a lot of time researching and debating them. But the Senate is about a week ahead of the House on this process. The Senate introduced theirs last week, Wednesday, and the House just introduced theirs late last night. So we don't have the numbers for those yet, but the Senate bills are 76 through 86.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, of course. We've been told by a lot of legislators that phone calls are more effective. So if you're comfortable doing that, call up their office right now, put yourself on mute and just leave them a voicemail. But email works good too.
I'm doing that right now.
Me too.